Hey guys, welcome back to Beyond the Sequence podcast. Your host Sarah Amadon and Amanda Archibald are here to go into some cholesterol discussion today. But we like to chit chat first, so I'll share a little bit about what I've been up to today. My parents are celebrating their 45th wedding anniversary, so my boys and I took them strawberry picking this morning and out to brunch, and we had the best time. So it's been super enjoyable that they moved closer to us in Indianapolis, and we get to spend time and just like, hey, what are you doing today? So yeah, that was kind of how we spent our morning before we sat down to talk about cholesterol.
So
Um,
is Zeke and Wesley now going to know they have to core or top off the strawberries and wash them and cut them all ready to be eaten? I mean, who's been assigned that job?
yeah, actually, this year we kind of went picking a little bit late. Everything came super early. Our peonies
Mm-hmm.
bloomed at the end of April, beginning of May. So by the time my anniversary rolled around for May 25th, which it was 19 years for us, a couple weeks ago, the peonies were already spent. So I was like lucky to have my husband will have my wedding bouquet remade every year. And so I love doing that. And it has peonies in it, which is our Indiana
Mm,
state flower. And then we just they were almost nowhere to be found. But with the
no.
strawberries, same thing. Like things were ripening really early, and so we're kind of in the middle between the early berries ripening and the later berries. And so they
Mm-hmm.
were really, really tiny, but like the sweetest
So
strawberries I've
yummy.
ever. Yeah, they're like maybe a large blueberry size. Like they're really, 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 really small. But the tops just like I
Just
use
come right out.
my thumbnail. Yeah, they don't hardly put up a fight like a store-bought large berry
Oh
does.
yeah, like
Yeah.
so
But because of that, we only used, quart size baskets. They were kind of swaying people away from the medium and large baskets.
they
So
should
we
be
only
out
got
there a long time.
so yeah, we were only out there for maybe 30, 45 minutes, and I was like, I'm gonna let these families with young kids have more berries. We'll wait for the later berries to come in and maybe
100%.
do some of the pre-picked stuff, and my mom and I can make some jam. So,
Yummy.
yeah.
My
Where are you
parents.
at, Amanda?
I'm in Vail, but you talk about making jam. So, my parents and my stepfather and my mother lived in France for so long, and it was very typical in the older French homes to have, as you know, would have two kitchens, and you still see that in the mountain towns or whatever across Europe and maybe other cultures too. But there's the kitchen, which is where you make everyday meals, and maybe you eat in there, maybe you don't. But then there's a back kitchen, the arrière cuisine, where you do all the jams and all the prep work. And yeah, so she always had an arrière cuisine for the jams. And it makes sense, right? Because that's where the heat is. And you don't want heat in the kitchen when you don't have air conditioning in the summer. So it's kind of an
Yeah.
interesting memory. Yeah, a lot of jam
That
made.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Did you do much canning growing up? Do you do canning now?
I don't do canning. I tend to do more like ferments, that kind of thing. So it's like cold jarred, right? As opposed to canning. I myself do not love jam. I know. I don't know why, because I don't love sweet things. I would rather just freeze the fruit, as is and pull them out. Paul, on the other hand, loves jam. And yeah, I've made jam and we had to learn it. I learned how to make jam as part of my education in England. I mean, our domestic science or home ec is putting up the harvest, right? It's extending the harvest in a different way. So, yeah, I don't make jams anymore.
I love that. Well, you do like to take herbs and make those little ice cube. You'll
Yeah.
puree them and ice cube them. And our
Mhm.
CSA is so awesome. We get fresh herbs just part of our rotation. So this week there was, tons of spring onions and rosemary. Last week it was fresh oregano and mint. And
Oh,
so I'm usually
fabulous.
either making teas or
I
I'm
was going to
putting that.
say teas for
Yeah, and
you.
teas, I'm incorporating it. I made took the fresh oregano and added it right to the olive oil from Greece, from our
Oh, awesome.
milestone
Yeah.
colleagues over there, and then added, apple cider vinegar and lemon juice and salt and pepper and the fresh oregano right in the dressing. So it
There you
was
go.
kind of
Dressing for the
infused in
week.
there. So I really get excited. I'm like, which herbs do we have this week that I
I
can play
know.
around
Looks so
with and
creative.
incorporate? Mhm.
Yeah, it just goes into a dressing. I mean, that's the easiest way, right? But when the basil comes on full, and you have other herbs. That's when we're making the pestos and the cubes. And, they last about a year. Like last year's is just running out now, like all the different pestos. So perfect, because now we're in fresh herb season. So you use them like you're using them, but then toward the end, mid to the end of the summer, it's like, okay, put everything away for the winter. So yeah. No, you asked where I am. I'm not at home. Those of you kind of watch our recordings, you mostly probably listening versus watching, but I'm actually up in Vale, that well, Sarah. When you come to my house, if you drive from Denver, usually you go the high route, I-70, through the high country, and then down into Vale. So Vale's, when Paul's driving, 2 hours from my house. And I'm driving it's a little longer. I bet you he's done it in under 2, but don't tell anyone because we have wide open roads. But yeah, I came out to Vale because we were having a little bit of work done in my office, and it was just or in our house, and it was just loud. And Paul's like, just go to the mountains. So I did. So I've spent the week, part of it like R&R out cycling and hiking. This was my training ground in cycling years ago. So it's hard to get back on your bike at, cycling 8 to 10,000 feet when you live at 5,000. So that's been interesting, but hiking too, not really hanging out in Vale, but just enjoying the environ, the environment. So, and then when you and Greg were just kind of testing the audio, because we have to do that when we change location, she's like, there's some kind of noise in the background. And you said, Amanda, is the air conditioning on? I'm like, Sarah, there's no air conditioning in the mountains in the older homes. We just don't have it because it's 49 degrees in the morning here in the summer, which is amazing. And 75, 80, whatever that is, low 20 centigrade for the high. So we don't need air conditioning, but the noise, if you're picking up on it, is a raging creek, I guess would be, because it's not a river. It's a raging creek that's coming down maybe like 10,000 feet or higher. And it's right next to where I'm staying. And I have the windows closed. So it's amazing. So all the windows are closed and you might still hear that. It's that
You'll
loud.
hear the healing hum is what we're going to call it
It's a
today.
healing hum against our dulcet tones. So yeah, so I'm up in the mountains for a couple more days before I head back to the canyons of the west of Colorado. So we're lucky.
Did Abby come with you this time?
No, Abby didn't come with, because I purposely chose a place where you have no doggies. Sometimes in these beautiful places that are rented, when dogs are allowed, sometimes they're not the most beautiful places. Plus, it's very foreign for an animal, right? And so they were going to sniff. And although Abby's never soiled inside, I mean, they're animals, right? It's territorial. So you have no idea what you're walking into. So no, the Abster stayed with Paul. She's been swimming and playing ball and doing all the things because it's hot now in the desert. So it's, the desert is high desert, not desert like Egypt or the Sahara, but it's high desert. But this is a hot time of year. So she's out real early, and then she goes out when the sun sets. So no, Abs is not here.
Perfect. Well, it
All
sounds like
right.
a lovely time to be able to reset and keep going.
Exactly. So let's pivot to where we're at. And I told Sarah, so any of you are actually watching us, you're like, Amanda's reading some. She is, because I didn't bring my notes. I didn't print them out when I left. So I'm just going to cue it. You'll see Sarah and I cue a little bit today. So my notes are on my screen, but we've got a really interesting topic for all of you. And what we're actually doing is pivoting from where we've been for the first 6, 5, 6. How many have we done? 5, 6, because we did ApoE topics this year. We're moving into a different segment where we're talking about signaling. And so the title today is Fat, or we could say cholesterol isn't the problem, signaling is. So it's a new segment for us of the next few podcasts that we're calling Signal Confusion. So in other words, what does this mean? And what it means is that the body is sending information or attempting to communicate, but the message that you're getting or the body is receiving is often misread because we're not actually looking at the total body environment and why the body is sending those signals. And there's probably no better topic to understand this, and I think it'll be really illuminating, than cholesterol and fat. Because you all know, listening in, whether you're a health enthusiast or you're trying to solve an issue, or maybe you're a practitioner, there's some of the lowest hanging fruit that we get, and we're told there's something wrong with you, is when we look at your triglycerides or your fats or your lipid panel or your cholesterol. We're all familiar with it. And then we've got to do something about it. Okay, immediately. Oh, you need a statin, you need to change your diet, what are you eating? And when we unpack this topic through the lens of genomics and signaling, it is a whole different conversation. So that's where we're heading. And like I said, we're going to start with the most misunderstood areas in health, which usually or often or always fat and cholesterol, closely followed by blood sugar. So I'm just going to introduce this a little bit more, set the stage. And Sarah and I are just going to talk back and forth a little bit through some topics that have come up. And then Sarah, you're going to get us rolling. So we know, even in your training, mine, because you trained after me, Sarah, the fat for decades and cholesterol have been framed as a problem and numbers to fear, like I just said. But in your body, in all of our bodies, lipids aren't calories and cholesterol isn't just a lab value. They're actually really important molecules to help us build membranes, support hormones, they shape immune communication, influence inflammation, and they're dynamically involved in repair. So, but we are always presented with them as being a problem. Like, this is a problem, you need to get it under control. So we're going to riff on that. We're going to spin it around, turn it upside down, and we're going to introduce different ways to think about it and ask some different questions like, it's not just cholesterol is high and lipids are high, but what is that trying to tell us? What is your body trying to tell us? What is that pattern trying to tell us? Is there a supply problem? Is there a demand problem? Is there a clearance problem? Is there something going on with the health of your vasculature, your blood vessels, etc.? And against all of that, how does genomics, or how do we look at those questions and look at somebody's genes in genomics to see if we can decipher where the bottlenecks are, why the body is trying to signal something to us that can help us unpack this dysfunction we're seeing in the labs. So that's the throwdown. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah,
Big
I think
throwdown.
it's such a great topic because when clients come to us, so often that's one of the things that they want to address or they have a lot of questions about because I think a lot of times trained physicians are still thinking in, the 1980s where, we've demonized cholesterol, but I feel like at some point they changed because so many people were on statins, didn't they lower the threshold for
Hmm.
the normal range
Yeah.
for cholesterol? And so it's not even necessarily a realistic number. Now, I'm not saying that it should be, sky high either. But I think our understanding and interpretation of some of those normal ranges is not that helpful. It's more I use it as a clue and as a
Exactly.
just something we're going to keep an eye on because I'm not worried about that number usually. I'm looking at all of the other cellular things that are surrounding that, and then we'll watch that number work itself out. Is kind of like blood sugar or watching someone's sleep improve or their stress resiliency, where they're feeling a little less crazy and a little more grounded. So it's just one of those markers that we got kind of just put a tab in to come back to later and check it. We're like, well, I'm not worried about it. We're going to see this
Hmm.
change.
Because it's like genes. If you're treating a number in isolation, then actually you're not looking upstream to the pattern. And I've just got a point here. The numbers matter, right? They're useful information, but it's the patterns and the signals around what is transpiring, which we're going to be talking about today, that result in that number. So many of us have been trained to look at numbers, and we forgot that there's a whole person with an intricate system of communication sitting right in front of us. And our job really is to figure out what signal is the body trying to tell us. So, we've got a number of thoughts. We're just going to riff on a little bit here. So a lipid panel doesn't tell us what somebody ate. but it may tell us what the body's trying to manage. Same with cholesterol. Like, and the way I was taught, Sarah, it was like, oh, it has to be something you ate. So in my training, it was like, it was in the era of get rid of the yolks and eat the snack wells. It's like, which I never did. I could never get into that, but it was almost at a hysteria level that it is the egg yolk that is causing the cholesterol problem. But we weren't thinking about, well, what is dysfunctional? Where's the on-ramp? Who took away the ramp, into the body system? Like, how are you going to board if you remove the ramp? So yeah, we got rid of the ramp and said, here, you can just fly off. So me and my
Yeah, I think
metaphors.
that's well said, and if you go back and listen to our choline episode, we kinda it'll piggyback and dovetail really nicely with our episode today just because our dietary cholesterol has maybe a 2% impact on blood cholesterol levels, and we're seeing that, excess carbohydrates actually have a bigger impact on our cholesterol levels over fat, so it's not just about what you're eating. But how your body is managing that, managing the inflammation and blood sugar as well. So that's well said.
Yeah, the numbers matter, but the patterns matter more. I'm going to jump over one here. Sometimes cholesterol is not the fire. So the elevated number, it is not the fire we're trying to put out. It's actually part of your response team. I think that's such a brilliant thing to talk about. You want to unpack that a little bit, Sarah, or you want me to run with it?
Yeah, that's a beautiful statement, because we use it as a marker to, as I mentioned, like, just put a pin in it. It's our body's responding to inflammation, and that's a great antioxidant with cholesterol, so when those numbers go up as an acute phase reactant,
Acute phase reactant.
with our body's so smart, it has the innate intelligence that you bring to light well, yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and that word you use, acute phase reactant, is like it was one of the one words I remember in my training. It's like not the way it was explained to us exactly, but we knew if somebody went through trauma. I don't know about postpartum, Sarah. You might know better or not. Like, um, but probably more in trauma, surgery, a heart attack, something like that. We know often cholesterol is sky high because the body is saying, I'm under stress. Something's happening. So it's going to activate the immune system. Well, in order to replicate immune cells, you have to have cholesterol as part of the membrane of those rapidly replicating cell dividing cells. So that's why we see cholesterol high. And maybe in quieter times, maybe the body's still saying there is an emergency and you're not paying attention to it. Where is the emergency? It's a signal. Um, so we can look to genes to try and understand the emergency, or we just have a conversation with you right in front of us. Like, what is going on? Who left the spigot on? Where is it? Why is it? And it usually has nothing to do with what you're eating, which is a really, really important point here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's well said. Um, Next point, I think the lipid number matters, but the road it travels on matters too. Do you think it matters more, the road it travels on, or just, about the
I'm
same?
actually, yes, this vascular terrain. And one thing that I really like about, we both use the 3x4 report, not exclusively, but we do use that a lot because we're working around the world. They have a segment called vascular health. And it sometimes it gets it's not that it gets missed off. It's like, well, okay, what is the information in that part of the genetic report telling us? It's telling us the susceptibility to somebody's vasculature. They may be, how do I want to say this? If they have a more pro-inflammatory predisposition, then it's easier to ignite inflammation in the vasculature, which includes the cardiovascular vasculature, the bone, and the brain too. So any hollow vessel that's transporting information, um, it just becomes an ignition switch. If your lipid levels are higher, your cholesterol levels higher, you're just going to add more, what's the word I'm looking for? Gasoline to the fire. So the road has to be well paved and smooth. And if it's bumpy and full of potholes, Yeah, I know. Then and some of our vasculature is, or it's easily ignited, then lipid is just fuel, more fuel for that fire. So, we have to look at the terrain at the same time we're looking at a number, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think especially for those who are in the fitness world, I have seen this where I've got people who are doing triathlons and super fit, they're, doing all the things and their cardiovascular markers are not good. And those are the individuals who maybe are overtraining and they're starting to see changes in their cardiovascular numbers, like APOEB or
B.
ApoB.
Amen.
Um, so like I just I think we need to not assume that because we're doing fitness and we're into it and, but those same people are the ones who might have a myocardial infarction, at a race. And you're like, "Well, what? They're the fittest people I know. How can that possibly happen?" And I think that's where genomics comes into play and that it's not just about food and fat, but it also is about how are we managing our load, and how's our recovery, and make sure we prioritize recovery or the body really does struggle to be able to support that level of training.
It's interesting you mentioned the word recovery. It's almost like longevity, it's trending. I don't know if you've noticed that. I mean, like in the fitness world, like, of course we know recovery, but it's actually becoming something that I'm seeing more and more practitioners talk about it openly, especially in athletics or just something, I work as we talk about a lot with midlife women, like as soon as the body composition change, we're going to work even harder. We're going to do our Orange Theory, whatever, and work even harder and see no weight loss. And the recovery piece went out of the window. And I think sometimes we're scared to do quote recovery, which doesn't mean to say do nothing. And to really understand that recovery means restoration, right? To kind of reset the balance so you're not trying to impose activity on a fire. So I mean, how do you talk to your athletes about that, or your non-athletes about the importance of recovery and put it in context for them?
Yeah, I mean, the most of my pro athletes, I think they are much more knowledgeable and have more resources to be able to assess and recover. They're seeing PT and they've got their dry needling and they travel with recovery boots and
All
they're
right.
really in tune with that. I would say it's more of the your weekend warriors that are doing triathlons or bike races and marathons that are self-starters, if you will, and they are probably the ones that don't necessarily know, to pay attention to some of those things and are way more likely to, have some of those inflammatory markers that turn into something that could be a vascular event.
Yeah.
So
Well, and it's an interesting thought because those people who are like amateur, but they're sort of semi-pro, a lot of their impetus may be on the times that they're not at work. So maybe before and after work, trying to get that training in. And
Mhm.
then you have a really heavy event at the weekend. And it's interesting being in Vail, when I used to live in Boulder too. I mean, this is activity central. It's probably where you are too. I remember like 30 years ago in Boulder, one of my friends there said, "Oh yeah, the average conversation is not where did you hike? It's how long were you out there and what was the altitude?" So it's like this badge of honor to
Yep.
be in intense pain. And if you're not out there doing something, then what are you doing? And that's where genetics is so useful to contextualize what people can and can't do, even the altitude piece as well. So,
Yeah,
um,
how many 14,000 footers have you been up, Amanda? It's just
I have done 4, and, I mean, I started them many years ago, and we have friends here who've done all of them. It's an amazing feat to do that, and some of them, you can only access the summits as climbing, you can get so far. But I'll say 2 things. it's miserable. When you're at 13,500 feet, I'm sorry, people. It's like being on Everest. It's like you take about 10 steps and you have to stop. Some people, genetically, as we know,
Yep.
can acclimate better. I don't have any problem with altitude, but it doesn't matter when you're at 14,000 feet. It's a painful experience, and then you get to the top and it's amazing. And the top of those mountains is hard. You're on scree in these mountains here. So 1 foot in, then you sink and you sink. But now it's become like, since COVID, I guess, it's like a team sport. And you actually, or a lottery to be able to park at the bottom of 14, which is never 14,000. You might be at 10,000 and start up. And I'm like, I'm done. When you took the mountains to become not a competition, but, to become Instagrammable or whatever, then we're done with the 14,000 footers. It's kind of changed. So, oh well.
Yeah, the competition of it all, because I would say some of us in our midlife were like, I'm going to reclaim my health. I'm going to, get back in the gym, or I'm going to train with my friend for this half marathon. And then we're pushing and pushing and pushing. And we're going, running on roads and, trying to hit your mile targets in
Yeah.
training programs so that you meet this deadline. It can really, push the body a little too far, and we do have to be thoughtful and careful how individually made we are with our genetics.
Yeah. And me being I mean, I'm altitude when I'm at home, 5,000 feet above sea level. And then we come to this level. A lot of people do fly in and I was at a bus stop the other day and folks from Tennessee, and they've been here many times, but as they've also gotten older, it's really hard for them. They have to have their rescue oxygen. They just don't do well. And so then they can't enjoy the mountains as much. But anyway, yeah, no more 14ers to me. I'll look at them and say, I've been there, done that. um, all right. So let's move on then. So, we discussed some kind of interesting thought processes as we go into this episode. So what do you think?
Yeah.
You ready to jump in and say this? Let's lay down the framework.
Yeah. So we have done a framework over the last number of episodes, kind of the what we're seeing, why it's happening, patterns we see in our practice, and how we're guiding that. So we're gonna shift that a little bit more for our cholesterol episode today, when we're looking at these genetics and cholesterol side by side. So discussing fundamentally what cholesterol and fat or fatty acids do. And as Amanda mentioned at the beginning of the episode, they're going to help us build our cell membranes and protect them. They're protective, thinking of fat as protecting our joints. Our brain is, needs a lot of fat. We want to make sure we're providing enough for that. That's why a traumatic brain injury and concussion can be so bad for the body overall, and why omega-3 fatty acids, for example, are so great to supplement with in a high dose for about a week after. And so even a TBI protocol, concussion protocol, shouldn't just be refraining from activity, but should incorporate nutrition interventions for that. We want to make sure we have enough fat for that, but they do influence immune signaling, so heavily involved in our immune system and participating in resolving inflammation. And that, I think, is a pretty good aha. What do you think of that, Amanda?
Yeah, no, 100%. Like every part of food, and Mark Hyman started this many years ago. He said food is information, but didn't which is true, but didn't really unpack it as much because it was almost like the pre-genomic era. But we know, particularly omega-3 fatty acids. And I want to talk to you before we get into the patterns. I want to come back to something you shared with me this week. But fats are signaling molecules, particularly your omega-3 fats. They're integral to membrane signal. They're dynamically involved in immune signaling, and in the cardiovasculature as well. So in membrane integrity. So they're not just pieces of calories, right? Or delivery systems for vitamins and minerals. They actually have roles, which we're going to unpack a little bit more today. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the bile acid piece is super fascinating. That goes into our liver, our gallbladder, all the way down through our digestion, to help us recycle and utilize and metabolize all of those fats. And when we have issues with elevated cholesterol, sometimes it's a lack of bile acids, or the liver or the gallbladder just aren't functioning optimally, or we're not releasing um, pancreatic enzymes to
Ugh.
support their metabolism. So when we see cholesterol, Amanda and I are like, have a new client coming in, we've got cholesterol metabolism issues. We're actually not only looking at genomics, but what are those markers with the liver? How is the gallbladder functioning? How is your digestion? Are we got bloating? Are we having any like diarrhea? When people say like, well, they eat something and it goes right through them. Well, if it goes right through you, you're not metabolizing those nutrients at all. They're gone. So assisting and supporting the digestive system to metabolize those nutrients better. But yeah, supporting the brain, the nervous system, and how the body responds to stress and repairs all of the demand on us day to day.
Hey, and
Um,
hormones, Sarah.
and
Hormones.
hormones, yeah, I can't forget
Hormones.
that. Oh my goodness. We really, really, we talk about high cholesterol all the time, but what are we doing about low cholesterol, Amanda? What's the problem there?
Oh man. Well, the person showing up will know that there's a low cholesterol issue because they possibly have brain fog. They have issues. Oh my gosh. Where do we even want to start? with with hormone production? Because guess what? Progesterone, testosterone, and estrogen start with a starter molecule called cholesterol. So, what damage did we do to people for the 20 something years where we removed the egg yolks from an egg? We were like throwing away nature's seed, nature's biggest signaling molecule.
Yeah, it's
So,
like the
yeah,
biggest
tonight, the
fat soluble vitamin in a big, bright, beautiful sunny yolk.
ex-
So yeah,
exactly.
I think that, leads to the patterns that we're starting to see, and the questions we're asking are, is there a supply issue? Is it a
Hmm.
demand issue, a clearance issue, or is there a pattern in increasing vulnerability to vasculature and vascular function? So this is our world, and we're just living in it. So, yeah, I mean, what are some things you're seeing in the oversupply pattern?
Yeah, so we're going to go through 5 patterns, right? As you just so let's talk about what the 5 patterns are, and what you're hearing us do here is reflect how we think. So we're going to go through those 5 patterns, talk about how we think, what we see, how that shows up with our clients, but also how we may be looking over to genes to give us clues that they are kind of a little bit of a monkey wrench in the works. They're either part of the issue or part of the solution. And before we jump into these patterns, I just want to give a nod to our friend Stacy Cesarski, who we mention a lot, because she and I have a series called Precision Health Architects for Practitioners. We're really pushing you to think in biochemistry and genetics. And we did a program last year or earlier this year, no, last year. Um, when we were talking about methylation, actually, and she was the one who said, you need to think about this with a supply and demand issue. Is it that you have too much demand on the methylation system where you've got genes that are pulling those methyl molecules like PEMT or COMT? If somebody's highly stressed or highly inflamed, they are probably putting huge demand on that system. Or is it a supply problem where there is some dysfunction in the genes, but often the dysfunction isn't the genes, they're under-resourced in that they don't have enough nutrients to function. Like probably saw William Wallace put out today something about riboflavin being integral to how MTHFR functions. So MTHFR may or may not be dysfunctional, but even if it is functional, if it's under-resourced with B2, it's like an inert gene. It was really an important part, and I think Chris Masterjohn has talked about that for a long time. It's not a new discovery, it's a known. So all that to say that, this some of what we're talking about today, the idea of supply and demand, was something that Stacy had presented about a year ago. And I just said, oh, what a brilliant way to teach us as practitioners, but also for when you are listening and, and you're looking at your genes yourself, maybe, as somebody, a health advocate for your own body is something to think about. Right. So, So the patterns are going to look like, is it a supply problem? Is it a clearance problem? Does your body not know what to do with the information, which happens a lot if your liver's gummed up? Is it a demand problem? Your body needs more than what you're taking in. Trauma, recovery, especially with athletes. Is it actually a diet issue? It can be. We can see that genetically, but it's a much lower rung on the ladder or much higher, right? It's like that is not the first thing we think about. Or is it a vascular terrain problem? Is the road, is the highway part of the problem because it's not paved? So that's where we're going, right? We're going to look at patterns. And I guess I'll jump in with number one, Sarah, like
Yeah.
the oversupply of supply. And so sometimes, so let's think about that. Like if I said to you, you got a supply problem, your body is over resourced. It's got too much coming in. What might you think about? Like what comes to mind that our listeners would kind of know? Oh, I can relate to that.
Yeah, I would say overfueling and not moving enough. So tendency towards a more sedentary lifestyle, high stress, strung out, burnt out, um, and then probably too much energy intake that your body doesn't quite know what to do with all of it. So, and we're just recycling excess cholesterol.
Yeah, exactly. So you said a key point. Oversupply is it oftentimes is your body is over resourced. You are potentially overeating. It's not like keto or whatever. It's like, yes, there's an excess of information coming in. It can be from food. It can be an imbalance genetically for you that your body does not handle carbohydrates as well. I mean, that can be an oversupply of carbohydrates, which we're able to see, an oversupply of alcohol. Um, and also, I was thinking about this morning, Sarah. An oversupply is not just a macro piece, a nutrient piece, an oversupply of stress.
Yeah.
So, which is an interesting thought. And I remember years ago learning this. So when we're under the hood in the body, Sarah and I were down deep in the bowels of the Krebs cycle, which is where your body takes information from carbohydrates, protein, and fat, just to be simplistic, and drives it into the currency of the body, which is ATP. So you think of this cycle as being a clock, right? And you on ramp, you get into this cycle at 12 o'clock. If your body is under a significant amount of stress, it can be from trauma, emotional stress, exercise stress, work stress, or you haven't resolved inflammation, that those free radicals will actually slow down the energy cycle. It literally does at like 2 o'clock on your clock. It hits enzymes, aconitase or cisaconitase, and slows it down. So now you have a backup. And this is such an important point, right? It was such an aha for me, Sarah, and probably you. And it always is when practitioners learn what's going on at this kind of cellular level or molecular level. When you slow down the clock, the body's like, where's this traffic going to go? What are we going to do with this information? We won't go too much into what the information is, but guess what? It backs up into fatty acid production, fat production. In other words, you're pushing as hard as you can to make energy, but your body's like, until you sort out this oxidative stress terrain, which is the first thing Sarah and I do, you're going to potentially have a backup. You're going to push all that information into fat, which is stored in your adipose. And you're like, why am I losing weight? Which is why we say you got to get your foot off the gas and resolve the underlying issue so we can get this highway to ATP production to work. So I look at that as well. Like oversupply is oversupply of stress,
Yeah, and I would add too, like
sleeping.
the detoxification system, if we have, a toxicity of heavy metals and, endocrine disrupting chemicals and microplastics, that's going to also strain the Krebs cycle and probably
Yes.
shunt things over to fatty acid production too.
In fact, that is such an important point because we know things like mercury, cadmium, arsenic right
Lead,
off the
all of it.
top,
Mhm.
right? Will actually not only they'll hit methylation, but they absolutely can stop. I'm going to say stop the cycle in its track. It will just make it really sludgy. So then we can say oversupply is overexposure.
Yeah, well said.
Overexposure to external signals, which also include, like you're saying, BPA, anything that's toxic. And some people, just by nature of where they're living, you're overexposed.
Yeah, Greg sent me like a little short micro documentary about why the cancer rates are so high in Iowa right now. They're,
Ugh,
the highest in the country, and they're really pinpointing the parts per billion of nitrates that are in the soil from all the
no
fertilizers, from
kidding.
hog production. And people in Iowa are, it should be one or less parts per billion. Is it parts per billion or million? I don't know. But one of those two things should be under one. But in the tap water for a lot of people in Iowa with all of that runoff, it's like 10. It's
Wow.
unbelievably high. And so our body doesn't know what to do with that oversupply, which, having as they say, the dose makes the poison, right? Like nitrates are just uh, you know, part of the environment, and they're always going to be. But when we have too much of something, our body gets overwhelmed and doesn't know what to do with that. Then we start seeing excess oxidative stress. The DNA can't repair. We've got errors in cellular production. And now we've got cancer cells that continue to grow and replicate. We've got tumors, and, then we have a diagnosis. And it's the manifestation of too much of something, the oversupply of these nitrates from too much farmland. We're concentrating, either agriculture or raising livestock instead of having these, smaller family farms with a mix
Mhm.
of needs. And we're creating the supply, but we're also using the demand on our own farms instead of trucking so much in. And so it's a huge problem in the United States, particularly in the Midwest. So and they're not
I know.
doing a good job with the government to help take care of that. So
Well, exactly. And I was just thinking as you were talking, so we know that farmers particularly susceptible to lymphomas and cancer if
and
they're farming
Parkinson's.
this way, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
But I'm also thinking, like you said, like if we're exposed to these poisons, these heavy metals, it can stop the Krebs cycle, slow it down. Then we have reverse flux. And if anybody listens to Dawn Waldron speak from the UK, reverse flux is what she spent a lot of her later career as a cancer survivor and now practitioner talking to people about that reverse flux is cancer's opportunity because then you're going to push any production over to glycolysis. So really fast rates of inefficient energy production as opposed to utilizing fats, which is the best way to extract energy. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's almost like you sit back and say, "Well, there are no surprises here. There are no surprises about obesity either, because maybe obesity it's not an oversupply of calories. In some people, it may be, but it may be an oversupply of environmental signals that are actually reverse engineering how our body is using information." Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, end the
Exactly.
podcast. We could stop right there.
Mic drop
um,
right there.
But if we look at genes, so that we might look at what that are opportunistic and oversupply. So let's say detoxification, put that aside, but just like purely from intake, we would look at genes like TCF7L2 or IRS1. So these are genes that if you tend towards higher carbohydrate intake and you have SNPs on these genes, they're not so good at initiating signaling from the pancreas to the cell membrane to where you will signal to receptor to uptake glucose. So right there, even though we're talking about oversupply from an environmental and stress perspective, there are genes we look at. So you know what? Potentially, we want to manipulate your carbohydrates because an oversupply from that macronutrient can be a bottleneck potentially. Potentially, we don't just say that. Say here, reduce your carbohydrates without validating that either. So,
Yeah, and
um,
those are definitely the clients, and for any clinicians who are looking at, fasting glucose and your A1C, those are the ones who will have maybe of normal fasting blood glucose and then an elevated A1C, and you're going, "Wait, but you're into fitness,
Yeah.
these numbers don't make sense." And so hopefully those that are listening that are watching a few of those clients that don't make a lot of sense, we're seeing genes for that, and greatly impacting, energy metabolism.
Yeah, no, totally. We have another candidate, so FTO. But I don't look at that one by itself. FTO, we know, is probably one of the most studied genes that we know that an oversupply of calories, and in this case, with this gene, an oversupply of fats can correlate with higher levels of BMI, no matter what the exercise is you're doing. It's like you can't outchase that gene is this is just like a little bit of a problematic gene. It doesn't predict anything, but usually when we see that gene, elevated intakes of calories, and along with some couple of other genes, we look at MC4R and LEPR, some people can have challenges with eating more on their plate than other people. It's just the nature of that gene. So that's an oversupply. And I'm also thinking, Sarah, before we get off oversupply, when we're looking at people following keto, so amping up the fat considerably. Some people, they'll come to us and say, I tried keto and I lost weight, but I felt terrible. Um, that is an oversupply of fat, too much fat at any one time, that the body at this molecular level may not be able to transport the fat or the derivatives of fat, the long chain fatty acids, into the mitochondria to burn them. So we can support that. But CPT1 alpha, and what is it, SLC22A5 are the two of the genes that we look at. Sometimes they go by a different name. So it's a transportation issue that can't deal with the supply of information coming in from fat. So once we see that, we know how to manipulate it. But yeah, those people often end up, they'll say, I felt terrible. They did lose weight, then they didn't lose weight, but they're extremely fatigued because now we've amped up the fat, but they can't extract energy
Not
from it efficiently.
transporting it well. They're missing probably a carnitine component
Yes.
to transport that, and then they're like, "Oh, well, now I
Yeah.
can utilize, fatty acids for fuel now and beta oxidation in the fasted state." That's what we want, right?
That's what we
We want
want.
to be able to continue to use fat in the fasted state, and that if beta oxidation isn't on board and you're missing carnitine, not happening.
Exactly. So we just kind of shoved a bunch of cars down the same street where the road is blocked. They're all sitting there saying, now what are we supposed to do? That's what we just did. But we can fix that in the body. And that's what genetics, it's like, okay, here's the issue. Here's the story of you in front of us. Maybe there's some labs and we're looking at, yeah, there's a collision problem here. The genetics helps us to see where the bottleneck is. And then to validate that gives us those critical like pivot points. Yeah. That are
Yeah.
unique to you.
I would say too, the FTO, when you have the AA genotype, you can also utilize a higher protein
Protein,
diet
yes.
to move towards weight loss. There was a 2-year study looking at, um, the control group and the intervention group, and those that had that AA genotype did lose more body fat over that time frame with that genotype, so than the control group. So then when I see that and I've got clients who are really, everything's lit up with struggling to manage their weight, I'm like, "Hey, guess what? Here's a
Guess what?
motivator. Here's a motivator for you to eat more protein." Like,
Like,
you know
finally, like, and it's not guesswork. It's like, this
Yeah.
actually works with your
Yep, this is
phenotype.
how we get to leverage things in a really beautiful way to support the unique individual in front of us. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's yeah, there's always gifts from genetics. There are gifts and, like, gifts like this. It's this way. We got to the fork in the road. We're gonna go down here. Okay. Alright. So, oversupply. We got that one, I think, is one of the most important ones. Counterbalance with demand, which we're going to get to. But so what happens? So you're going to take this one, Sarah. So then you have an oversupply. And we talked about a little bit of this with detoxification. Then the body's got to do something to clear like the logjam. So should we talk about that?
Yeah, yeah, having a clearance issue, I know I kind of dabbled in that earlier. but just talking about how well are we managing the load that we are taking in? How are we metabolizing that? Is your liver online? Do you have enough choline on board to even make bile, which helps us to emulsify fat through our digestive process? Do we have bile acids available to then metabolize those fats? And are we, packaging them up? Or are they making it, through our vasculature? Or is the vasculature, slowing down? Is it pinched? Is it narrowing that we're not even able to move those around the body? But yeah, the bile acid piece, I feel like dietitians, and I still feel novice in it myself, but I feel like bile acids are not really talked about or utilized enough as a way to offset someone who is missing a gallbladder or who's clearly having issues digesting fat if they have steatorrhea. So, if you're using the restroom and you have a foamy, stool, if you see an oily film on the top of the toilet, like those are clues that you're passing excess fat in your stool. So you could be holding on to some, you could be passing it too quickly. We've got an in and out kind of issue, but those bile acids are really crucial to helping that metabolism.
And bile acids are also signaling molecules as well.
Hmm.
They signal to the GLP-1 gene, actually. So think
Ooh, I
about
don't
that.
think I knew that.
Ooh,
Yeah, tell me more,
yeah.
Amanda.
Yeah, not on this one, but yeah, they do. It's a process. Maybe we bring that up next time, but yeah. And so think about that. We connect the dots. Poor bile acid production or secretion, and weight loss resistance. Now, is that the answer? No, but I'm with you. The more and more of what I'm seeing, everything comes back to digestion, right? Like simplistic pieces, but bile acids are so integral as a signaling molecule as well as an emulsifier. So Don Waldron says bile acids are like the dish detergent in your body. It was brilliant. But washing up liquid, like it surrounds the fat so you can emulsify it and get rid of it. So bile acids are the
Yeah.
body's detergent.
That's
Brilliant.
I like that.
That right?
I'm not gonna forget it now.
No, I couldn't. She just wrote about it she has a Substack called Flexible, which is really fun. She's a fun way of writing. So I would definitely recommend people,
Okay, I'm
jump
putting you
on
on the
that.
spot here. You may not know the answer to this question,
I
but
may not,
so as a supplement, bile acids would be like a TUDCA or an ox bile, like in a
maybe, yeah.
supplement form. Are there ways to do that with food? And I don't.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally. And that's where I start because I don't have a gallbladder. You don't either, right? Did you have your
Nope.
gallbladder removed? Okay.
Mhm, that's how I
So
got here in front of you, Amanda. This is the whole story.
I pulled you along. What I found, let's talk about our own experience with our gallbladder, and I'm going to answer that question. So what I found when I had my gallbladder out, it took maybe about 6 weeks to adapt, maybe 2 months. I'm like, oh man, this diarrhea and this, that, and the other, and to kind of get back to normal. A lot of people apparently don't really get back to normal, and they take oxbol. I've never needed to take it, or Tudka. I played around with Tudka. I've never needed to take it, but I stimulate bile acid through bitter foods, which
Mm,
so you can do and with people who really struggle with that, and maybe they can't access that, or they've got a snip on their TAS2R38 gene. It says, oh my gosh, bitter and sulfury foods like just taste terrible. You can use things like an artichoke extract, something like that, or eat
mm,
artichokes. So I think it beets artichoke ginger,
arugula.
Swedish arugula, Swedish bitters for some people. Or yeah, you change up your salad. You put what is the word? Chicory. They could chicory, frise. You hide some of those bitter leaves with your comforting leaves, whatever you're using for your salads.
And I wonder, okay, this is really interesting. We're gonna go to have a cultural moment. So I was in New Orleans for the ASPDA conference last month, and if you go to Cafe Du Monde, they have their coffee and they add chicory to it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
chicory coffee, and I just had this moment, this thought That well, think about all the fried foods that they have down there. I wonder if that's like a cultural significance with a
Yeah.
bitter added to coffee with, they have the fried, beignets,
Yeah, and
but
that
they
is actually stimulating bile production.
Mhm.
It's quite you never know, it's quite brilliant.
Ooh,
Now you have
like
to go back and
pair
look.
those together and cash only.
Yeah. No, that's smart. Yeah, we have to think what they put in the gumbo, right? Is there like anything bitter in the gumbo? But our ancestors were brilliant. I mean, African cuisine, across all the countries is absolutely amazing. And traditional societies in these wonderful countries all have like stimulating foods. They just do, like the digestive supporting foods. So yeah, so we support digestion without gallbladders with bitters, and some people do need to take a bitter, like a Swedish
Mhm.
bitter, or it's just too affrontive to think about bitter. I mean, it doesn't work in the palate. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm definitely someone who, at least with bigger meals, especially if I'm eating out, I can't control the ingredients or I just want to like participate in the community and conviviality of it all. Digest by Designs for Health, they
yeah,
have, betaine HCl pepsin, some pancreatic enzymes, and ox bile, kind of an all in one top to bottom digestive support, and it does help a lot, and you can take it at the beginning of the meal when you know you're gonna have something that maybe isn't gonna agree with, your
yeah,
digestion, but you can still take it at the end of the meal, and this is, writing my research paper on using betaine HCl, and you just may need a little bit more because by the time you've added food to it, your stomach goes from acidic on an empty stomach to now the pH is going up more towards neutral, so you just
mhm,
may need an additional capsule if you take it at the end of a meal. But if you're someone who is refluxy and you've got bloating and your food just feels like it's sitting there and it's churning and churning and churning, or you try to go to sleep but you feel over full, like add some digestive support. Like
yeah, I agree.
this, you can help this. Let me tell you. And it sometimes can turn the ship around in 20 minutes, and it's so helpful. I'm
And
so
sometimes
grateful.
it is a little bit of push and pull, right? We see that with people. Some people really tolerate betaine HCl really well, or the digestive enzymes, and others we have to go a different route.
Definitely.
For
Yeah,
sure.
if we haven't ruled out H. pylori with the burping and the bloating and all of that stuff, you don't wanna burn a hole in your stomach by adding adding more acid to the issue, but we really, really, really don't wanna consistently be taking omeprazole and Tums and, baking soda, like those are helpful in the moment occasionally, but if you're someone who's going back to that again and again, go see Amy McRae.
Sammy McRae. We lean
She's our
into her all the
GI.
time, like, "Hey, what can we do here? And what could we add there?" Or like, "What is this new diagnosis that we found?" I sent to both of you. Like, "What do we do with this?" Um, Collagenous colitis was what it was. I said, "Why?" I just suddenly had 2 patients with this. And so, yeah,
Yes,
she
I hadn't heard of that before. It was super, super fascinating to read about that.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, so clearance, and you just kind of look at the gene, a couple of things on the clearance. So one of the great things that we see in one of Life Code's tests from the UK, but not in other tests, and we really got to push them, is the CYP7A1 gene that literally helps the body produce bile from cholesterol. So cholesterol is the substrate. And then CYP7A1 initiate, like, kinda gets the process working, and then you add in your your glycine and taurine detergent pieces, so that you end up with, functional, bile acid, and maybe it's bile salts by then. No, bile acid. Then they're actually transformed to bile salts, which are the signaling molecule, by the way. So cholesterol, one more reason, cholesterol is critical. And if you having your cholesterol pushed down to under like, some abysmally low levels. Like somebody said recently, my doctor wanted my LDL to be 55. I'm like, you're not even going to be alive. I mean, your brain, what is your brain going to use as a substrate? And where are you going to get any sex hormones from? And how on earth are you going to digest anything when you don't have the substrate to make bile? So, yeah, so I think it was a really good one to think about with clearance and Tudker. I've seen work wonders with people with elevated bilirubin and elevated liver enzymes showing like there's a bottleneck. But we also, real quick, and we'll move on with, there's some other genes that we see come up a lot, Sarah. CETP, LPL, they're both involved in kind of moving or unpacking and transporting and moving back to the liver, triglycerides or VLDL and LDL. So the body is just consistent like transportation system, and SNPs or variants in those genes can kind of upset this smooth moving around of fat and cholesterol molecules, which your body needs. So I would say of all the genes I see dysregulated, maybe you have some other high, low hanging fruit or ones that are always there. It's CETP and LPL, a very high frequency disruptors, which is why we see a lot of upside down LDL and HDL, because these genes are just kind of getting in there and just kind of changing the transportation of the production line.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that those individuals, as a result of their familial, you know, hypercholesterolemia, like, I think they're also going to have to pay more attention to methylation. They're going to have to pay attention to their stress levels more than other people because of how their body metabolizes those fats and cholesterol. It's just going to make them more sensitive to stress and increasing cholesterol levels if we're not supporting the clearance of that. Yeah, and I would say that includes like lymphatic drainage alongside all of that too.
Yeah. So with those individuals, turn down the information spigot coming into the body, because remember, cholesterol and fats are acute phase reactants. They're going to be pulled. If the body perceives the environment as a stress, it's going to tap the immune system, which is going to utilize fatty acids and cholesterol to do its work. So, like, take your foot off the gas, clean the liver, right? Because if the liver is gummed up, bitter foods, people, these genes are going to be opportunistic. They're just going to add more collisions, more detours, or more disruption. Is that what you're thinking, Sarah?
Mhm. Yeah, for
Clearance.
sure.
And then the ApoE piece. So I love this idea. So ApoE, its real job is to clear stuff. It's to stick a label on these chylomicrons, or these, triglycerides or lipoproteins, we call them, that are moving VLDL and LDL around the body. It's to stick a label on them, say, go back to the liver. Like, it's time to leave, or your brain, well, I won't say brain, or something, your immune system needs more cholesterol. So we're going to send you back to liver, and the liver is going to compartmentalize, decide where you're going to go. So ApoE is really part of a clearance system. And to your point about lymphatics and the 4 allele, which comes up pretty quite a lot, but we talked about that last time in our one time ago in our podcast. So the 4 allele can kind of make it a little bit disruptive. It's not as great a clearer. So don't make it work so hard. Make sure you clear the terrain to start with. You have your bitter foods. You support the liver, whose job is to do all this, like traffic control. So genes tell us where the bottlenecks can be here, right, with clearance. But it's the environment you surround your body with. It's the signals you send to your body above and beyond food that are a part of the challenge. And I love your point about the lymphatic system, because we've got clean the liver, drink your milk thistle tea. But the lymphatic system, let's talk about, is the way your body moves this stuff around and gets it out. Let's talk about that a moment.
Yeah, it's kinda like the night shift for, the trash, waste products, you know? So, taking out the metabolic trash, I like to say, and it's working behind the scenes. We put so much emphasis on our blood, on our organs, but, like, the lymphatics is just, like, feels elusive, but it's doing so much of the cleanup, and the repair work. Um, but if we are not moving enough, this is where, like, the tapping and the bouncing and some of that comes into play. But if we're seeing swelling in the face, or we've got, lymph nodes and glands that just are feeling puffy, they're feeling tender, that's part of your immune system. And if that gets backed up, that's not functioning properly, we're in a heap of trouble, I think.
Yeah, and the lymphatic system doesn't have a pump, right? So the way we move it is we move. And I think, like you mentioned, like moving and tapping or shaking or bouncing. You don't have to like jump up and down, but just gentle bouncing when you get up actually activates the immune system. And that's what Qigong and Tai Chi. I mean, it's brilliant. That's really what it's doing, or yoga. But I love Qigong is so approachable for this. So that is like your inbuilt movement driven clearance detoxification system, right? Who
Yeah.
thought of that? Yeah.
It's the coolest, and then
It's
that's
the
where,
coolest.
even gentle inversions can make a huge difference
I
because
didn't think
gravity
about
is
that.
pulling
Yeah.
everything one way. That's where, like, just not being sedentary, I'm like, if we're sitting in a chair all day and we're not moving at all, whether that is, walking, but just changing your posture makes a huge difference in your blood flow, but also your lymphatic flow. Um, yeah.
So like legs up the wall, like you don't have to stand on your head, right? That's real difficult for a lot of people. Or even doing a shoulder stand is difficult. Those are inversions, but you could just put your legs
Puppy
up a wall.
pose. Yeah,
What?
the puppy pose, like, if
Puppy pose. Yeah.
Yep. Mhm.
Or literally, like you have your couch, you just put your legs up on the couch. So you're just kind of
Mhm.
like an L like
Lay
this.
on the
Uh,
floor, yep.
lay on the floor, and so you're inverting to kind of move stuff. So you don't have to be a performance athlete to do this. This is gentle work. And if you've got genes that are like a little bit, meh, I don't want to clear things. How do we know that? Like some of those lipid cholesterol genes I've just talked about, detoxification genes, and this gentle way of sending signals to your body to help it clear stuff. So it's not about taking a supplement, right? It's
That's
so
right.
so we've got oversupply. We talked about clearance. What about
Demand is next,
demand?
Amanda.
Demand. So there's two ways I look at demand, and we've touched on both of them. So we should be able to zip through this. Demand on your body, oftentimes is going to come from the outside. So we talked about stress. Poor sleep is another one. Anything that places demand on your body above and beyond what it can handle creates over demand. Over demand will activate your immune system. And some of us have what we call gain of function genes. It means they're opportunistic. Like you light a match near them, they're like, thank you. I'm going to light a bonfire now. So things like IL-6, TNF alpha, some of you might look at your genetics and say, depending on the company, you say, oh my gosh, I've got a bunch of dots, or I've got a bunch of purple and maroon, or a bunch of reds. That means it's very easy to activate your immune system. That puts a lot of demand on your body. It will take all your energy. It will raise your blood sugar, raise those free fatty acids that you may see elevated triglycerides, raise cholesterol, because your body needs those molecules to meet the demand you place on it. This isn't about running a race. It's like day-to-day living. If you put too much demand on your body, some of us have opportunistic genes, and you'll be the inflamed person with the elevated ferritin, maybe the elevated CRP, but everything's normal. You're like, well, I don't feel that there's an issue until you have an autoimmune challenge. So demand is a signal coming from your environment. See how I was calling this signaling. And if you don't reduce the signals, which is hard to do, then your body's going to respond. So that's one way I think of demand. And the other demand, and you and I talked about it, and again, it comes from overexercise, or like we think of athletes, or it
Mhm.
may be like you were talking about with your nurse practitioner friend the other day. Your moms, it is your season of life. The demand on moms with kids who are not in college is huge, particularly if they're not even teens yet. And on parents, right? This huge demand for seasons of life. So your cortisol can be higher. Cortisol is going to activate pathways that put pressure on the methylation pathway. And if you methylation process, and methylation is needed in many corners of the body, particularly to get rid of dopamine, your stress hormones, deeply needed, but it's needed to make choline for your membranes, right? It's needed to make creatine to recover, like to rebuild muscle or whatever you're trying to rebuild to recover. So if the demand is higher than your body has the resources to meet, which we talked about, oftentimes it's nutrient insufficiency, then um, then your body suffers. And so there are a bunch of genes we may look at, but a lot of times it's more the environment. What state is you in your life and what season of life are you in? What are the demands on you that we have to support so your body can function? And it's external signals. It's not about you ate too much, you ate too little. Well, some of it is, but demand is the environment. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I agree. And it's especially fun when you're someone who doesn't have a gallbladder that
Yeah,
challenges your digestion on metabolizing all those nutrients and you're a mom. But I think, I've probably mentioned this before, but being a parent right now just feels incredibly unfair with the predators online. Nothing feels safe. Everything is digital, just trying to lock down access, and try to protect your children. It feels like a full time job in and of itself.
it
And
is. It
it's
is.
completely different from my childhood, and there's no handbook for this, and so we're learning as we go along what was good, what wasn't good, giving everyone technology and an iPad at school or a Chromebook, and now we're saying, "No, we need to take them out because kids can't write," they aren't having enough experience with writing, because we're doing so much on devices now, and so we're shifting, we're going too far one direction or the other, and we're still not finding that helpful balance. Um,
Well, and think about them. They're their own little universe. I think of your kids, like they're their own little universe with all these inputs coming in. Like the highway is home, and this is a safe place. But as soon as they leave, right, or even at home, the sheer amount of information coming at them. And they're little, like we deal with it as adults, but it's a boxing match for their metabolism. So this demand for their body to cope with this world right now it is high, right?
yeah.
Which is why I think we do see, all these labels, ADHD and ADD and this, that, and the other. I just think it's little bodies in an over-resourced environment with, some genetic mislabeling, genetic diversions down wrong pathways. But imagine a dopamine pathway that can sort of function if it's in a quiet space. Now we put it in an over-resourced highly noisy environment called school or whatever, or even if we're at a game, a football game, it's really loud. It is this when was it? You were recently at a baseball game, right? A live one, or was it the
Yeah, I
banana
went to, Banana Ball, so, yeah, our Indiana Clowns played here, so the Savannah Bananas, it's one of the
Savannah
teams from
banana? That's
in
it.
Banana Ball, and Wesley is in dance and enjoys baseball, so my hope is that he'll be a Banana Ball player
Oh my
someday.
God, that would be perfect because he could dance and goof around and be a good athlete too. So
Exactly.
but
I
you think I
love it.
was at a hockey game. I was out in California visiting a friend in Palm Springs. He went to their local hockey. And it was really cool. But the entire thing is so loud. Like there is no downtime. It's even when there's live play, it's so loud. And you have
Yeah,
to jump up and down and there's all these rituals and all this food and all this stuff. I'm like, oh my God, I need like a Valium when we get out of here. I need to put my
yeah.
legs up the wall. But no, it was super fun, but it is super high energy.
Yeah, I think
Like,
everything now is trying to create an experience, and even Banana Ball, which is great, they've changed the game. So they've removed the slow, boring parts of the game where they're like, "Hey, this game isn't gonna go on forever. We have a limit of, 2 hours for the
yeah.
entire game. If you have a walk, instead of just walking to first base, you can actually sprint and steal second until all 7 players, not the catcher or the pitcher, everyone touches the ball. So until that happens, the play is still live. So they're
Ah,
changing, like, the excitement of the game, trying to keep it more engaging. They're adding extra points for trick plays. Once one team has scored so many runs in one inning, they automatically end the inning. So these innings don't go on forever. They've changed the rules to make it more fun and more engaging, and packing the fun and excitement into 2 hours instead of 3 or maybe 4 hours where it's just really dragging on. We're
Oh,
trying to optimize entertainment at every moment, and,
interesting.
in some ways, I love that, and in other ways, I'm like, "Ah, it's so much,"
It's
that it
so
just
much.
increases the expectation for the dopamine at every moment, and that's a challenge.
Dopamine Nation. I've not read the book yet, but yeah. Yeah, as someone who sat in a 14 and 16 inning game at 1 in the morning in
Ooh.
Milwaukee, I'm like, "I'm so over this, Paul.
Yeah.
I'm leaving." After the 7th inning, if it's 0-0, we can go into overtime. But at least that's the long, the long play. So, all right. So let's move on. Like our last two patterns. So over demand, oversupply, too much coming in, clearance, inability to get it out of the body or divide it to where it needs to go. Demand, usual external resources that your body's reacting to, too much demand. What about, then we have this one, that the misread healthy diet pattern, which we talked about a little bit with keto and carbs. So, um, yeah, what do you think? Do we need to go into that one that genes
I
tell us?
mean, not a ton, but I would say there are definitely those who try to eat healthy all the time and they're very anti-fat in their diet. It just we don't want to be too healthy in the way that we're avoiding fat altogether. So just being thoughtful to make sure we have enough supply to support our cholesterol production, our cell membranes, everything that is protective in that. So yeah, I don't know that we necessarily need to dig into it too much.
No, I mean, we do know with certain genes, like you talked about with FTO, does well
Mhm.
with a higher protein diet. If there's weight loss resistance, ApoE4, FABP2, very sensitive to saturated fat. So, there are, it's not a no fat, it's looking at the quality of the fat. And then I wanted to come back to something that you've mentioned. We talk a lot about fats one and fats two, understanding if you're plant forward or vegan, that those genes interfere with your ability to produce EPA and DHA, the active forms of omega-3, but you said there's an even more sensitive gene that we look at, ELVO2, is that the
Yep.
right?
Mhm. ELOVL2.
Yeah, I get
And
that mixed up.
that one's been a more recent add to the 3x4 report, and I'm really starting to see a lot of high impact for that. Because I mean, if we're not able to convert to those, the EPA or DHA, we're gonna struggle with a lot of things. So yeah, that conversion part is pretty important. It's not just about getting enough, fat in general and allowing the body to do that on its own. It's like, is our arachidonic acid high? Is it low? What's our EPA, DHA? And having athletes who, need it big time. It's those are the ones I have to really emphasize omega 3s. I'm like, if you don't get it in the diet, you have to supplement. Like this is not a
It's
joke.
not. Well, I said those so that this is not negotiable. And when I lean forward and say that, like, okay.
Yep.
But they
So
even with those genes have to supplement at a higher level, I think you said too. So it's not
yeah.
just supplement, it's
Yep, it's
higher.
not a little like, I know cutting back to the 1 capsule because it's cheaper sounds good, but, if you eat your salmon that day, you don't have to take your supplement. But if you don't, and you don't eat any other foods or nuts or seeds, but even like the plant-based ones are lower in that, and they may not do as well with the conversion, then yeah, we need 2 to 3 grams of those omega-3s, and again, not just that much for fish oil. What's the omega-3 content, for those supplements? Because if you go to and I've given this example before, but Kirkland, their fish oil, it's like, "Hey, look at the krill oil or look at, this fish oil," and they're looking at how many milligrams of are of
Sure.
the fish oil. That's not the content of the omega-3. Like, krill oil does have omega-3, but when you're looking at how much and how many capsules, you'd have to have, like, 8 capsules of the Kirkland krill
To
oil
deliver.
to deliver the same amount that, like a Nordic Naturals would be able to do, especially in the I love their 2X Sport. I love it's the Ultimate Omega 2X Sport for that higher dose. If you're someone who needs, D3 alongside that for that CYP2R1 SNP, they have an Ultimate Omega that has
That's a
D3 in it
DN
too.
too.
Mhm.
And those SNPs often come together, so that's a really important point. So it's a Nordic
Yes.
Naturals. What's it called? The 2 time I haven't looked at it for a while. 2
They're
times.
they're third party certified, so they're sport ready, but they're
Ah,
the
okay.
2X Sport is what it's called.
Oh, okay. And it has
So
a DN as well, or you can have that
the
option.
2X does not have the D, but then the Ultimate Omega is still a higher dose. It's just not as high as the 2X, but the Ultimate Omega with the D3 is a great one if you need
No
the
kidding.
vitamin
I didn't know
D2.
that.
Mhm.
That's great. And for the rest of us who don't need that level because we're not like these performance athletes are gonna have higher demand,
Yeah, you might
also
do great with just a cod liver oil would probably be just fine. Mhm.
or you can do one of the milestone, products, well, because they infuse with krill if you just need, like, the top up, but then you get the polyphenols in
I
the
thought
omega-3.
their omega a vegan one though?
Yeah, it is, so
Okay.
they're gonna use algae, actually.
Algae,
It's
yeah.
just
Mhm.
interesting, yeah. She'd have
Mhm.
to look, but again, a different formulation versus what we're looking at for athletes, so
Mhm.
more on that. Alright, so last one. So, yeah, we can tell few genes how we might steer things, from a dietary perspective. So it's more at the macros, right? And then very specific when we might be looking at caffeine or the omega-3s, et cetera, or iron, that comes up a lot. So what about the last one, the vascular terrain, which we talked about. Oh, this one is so interesting. We talked about sort of at the beginning. Do you wanna I know it's me who's supposed to take this, but I keep talking with you, so why don't I kick it over to you? Or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how what's the vascular integrity doing? Keeping an eye on what's nitric oxide doing. I come to that often with NOS3 or ENOS. And those are really helpful too, especially for my athletes, is who's going to really have the most advantage for using nitrate rich foods and
Exactly.
a beetroot powder if you're going to supplement with that. Because sometimes I don't see that as an issue. And I'm like, well, it's not that you can't, it's just a general recommendation, right, for sports performance. But it's like, we're going to use your money elsewhere to support the inflammatory or the omega 3s. And we need that
Mhm.
2X sport, Nordic Naturals. But yeah, we want to make sure the vasculature and the terrain there is functioning well. I would say especially with fat soluble vitamins, if our vitamin A, D3, vitamin K, vitamin E, if those are not circulating in ample supply, we may start to see calcification. So calcium may
Ah,
move
yeah.
out of teeth and bones and then into the vasculature where we're going to start seeing hardening of the arteries and issues popping up from a cardiovascular standpoint. So that's something I look at, when I'm looking at genetics is, are we having loss of bone? Are we having major teeth issues? Because is calcium escaping, out of those tissues and into the blood and causing some issues there. So we just treat this medically when we should be treating it nutritionally. And it doesn't make sense to me why we haven't done a better job of helping patients understand why fat soluble vitamins are so important. About 50% of the US population is deficient in vitamin A, but
Which is crazy.
we're not testing retinol, we're not testing ceruloplasmin with copper and zinc levels and alongside the iron, we just keep giving iron, and that is going to continue to oxidize when it doesn't know where to go.
Explain the ceruloplasma, what did you just say? Ceruloplasmin.
Ceruloplasmin, it's kind of the, signaling molecule storage form for copper, I think, if I'm remembering
Mhm.
correctly how to explain that, but, the, like, full Monty panel is what my friend Jackie Dykes, a sports dietitian, would recommend, including all of those nutrients with that panel. The magnesium advocacy group, would recommend those as well, so.
Because they work together is what you're saying. I was just
Mhm.
trying to connect
Correct.
that.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so we're sort of missing the forest for the trees and just saying, "Give more iron," and I'm like, come back to me in 2 months when that hasn't worked."
And
Just
when your CRP is even higher.
Yep, your CRP is even higher. You have to understand that vitamin A helps to mobilize some of those other minerals, and our fat soluble vitamins cannot be ignored. But I know in my program, we were kind of like stay away from vitamin A, don't supplement it. We just were not recommending it at all because you can overdose it, and you can, but like at really, really high doses. And we're not eating organ meats. I know I've talked about this before, but it makes me crazy because we're seeing iron metabolism issues and not looking at any of the other nutrients that are in the picture. So,
And right along that is going to be digestive issues where vitamin A is so integral to that mucin, the healthy
yeah,
mucin layer, right?
we need it for eyes, we need it for immune system, we need it for skin, we need it for fertility.
A and
Um,
D work together. So you can be supplementing D and it's like, well, I've listened my dance partner, right?
Correct.
So
Yes, yeah. My colleague Pamela Schoenfeld did some
oh, yeah.
amazing talks and podcasts on amazing vitamin A, and we need a molecule of vitamin D for every molecule of A, and vice versa. So
Work together.
we can't just simply think that vitamin D will be enough. And we talk about vitamin D3, K2. If you need all three, Da Vinci has both a liquid or a capsule with
So
ADK.
ADK together. Yeah,
ADK,
that was,
yeah.
I haven't seen that as a formulation for quite some time because it was
Mhm.
trending for a while. I'm like, it totally makes sense. So,
Mhm. Yeah,
um,
ADK can go together, and, you can keep an eye on those levels, but I would be shocked to ever hear someone that has over supplemented with vitamin A. But even, measles severity goes up in vitamin A deficient bodies. So this is where nutrients, support the immune system, that support, when we have an onslaught of some kind of infection. The body is supposed to take care of that.
mhm.
But we have to first have nutrient sufficiency to be able to do
It
that.
could be a supply issue or a demand issue, actually, under supply
Both.
and higher demand.
Mhm.
Um, when you are running testing, it's just something I have seen quite a lot, because enos, so to make nitric oxide, which results in vasodilation, which we want, for healthy arteries to move stuff through, all the resources, excuse me, healthy blood vessels to move stuff through. Um, so enos requires arginine as a substrate, like that's how we make nitric oxide and folate. We won't go into that VH4. But one thing I kept seeing in labs, when we were running advanced labs like a Nutrival, maybe organic acid or whatever, is issues with citrulline and arginine. Do you see that at all? Like low levels, which particularly with your athletes, I have to wonder because that's a
Mhm.
system that's under-resourced. Are you seeing that, or have you seen that?
I think I've seen it a couple times. Thankfully, most of the time I can run genomics and I don't need a lot of labs, and a lot of my athletes don't have access to a lot of labs, and they don't necessarily have the income unless, USA is running some of those labs, but they're pretty basic. So I don't see it often, but when I have those labs in front of me, I am seeing it occasionally. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Which is a real vascular integrity issue because if you what is under resource? Is it dietary? Is it digestive? Is urea cycle like running like a breakneck speeds because it's trying to detoxify ammonia or something? Or they're eating a huge amount of meat, it's really creating a lot of demand on the urea cycle. But yeah, you can't make nitric oxide without arginine. So you can get that from the diet, but I've seen that a lot. It's always a flag for me. Like,
Does Does magnesium have a play in that? Because it just I know for my athletes, they use up so much magnesium, and I know that when we're deficient in magnesium, it increases oxidative stress, so that's what makes me think, like, there's
And
gotta be a connection in there with the Krebs cycle that I am less familiar with.
yeah, yeah. One more to examine. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. So nitric oxide, what else? So we're in the vascular, yeah, you went right into that because it is how you move stuff through, right? You have to uh, dilate the blood vessels to move information through to get to tissues or whatever the body needs. Pretty important. So NOS3, ENOS. And then something that we learn ad nauseum and I teach ad nauseum is homocysteine, people. All
Yes,
of you,
snaps.
every one of you. If you have not had a homocysteine ever measured or the next checkup you have with your doctor, please ask them for a vitamin D, a fasting insulin, okay, and a homocysteine. Because elevated homocysteine does not mean to say you have an MTHFR aberration, please. It's usually an under-resource issue that we figure out in genetics and nutrient intake. But elevated homocysteine will disrupt dynamically not only nitric oxide production, but it will interfere with the integrity of your vasculature. It is one of the best things that gives us so much insight into the body because it affects so many things. But elevated homocysteine will basically damage your vasculature, which means your bone, because it's the most vascularized tissue in the body, it will affect your neurons, your brain, and it will affect your cardiovascular health. So that we are very interested in the methylation genes. We'll look at those to understand what's going on. And also genes that interfere with how well your body manages oxidative stress. So MNSOD, GPX, catalase. And so the vascular health piece is so often missed off. It's not even thought about. But you could have perfect lipids and cholesterol. But if it's entering like this pothole road or where there's constant detours because information can't pass through your vasculature, doesn't matter how good your cholesterol and lipids are. We've missed the biggest thing, which is the transportation highway. So the vascular health piece, to me, Sarah, is more important than whether your cholesterol is elevated or your lipids are, because what happens if you're on a statin, we get that under control, but you enter into this pothole environment, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like putting a leash or, it's holding back your horse in the Kentucky Derby, and they can't run at all, and so it just sits in the stall, and then we're not actually in the race. We're losing energy production as a whole, by depleting CoQ10, which goes into the electron transport chain, and we're not making ATP. ATP is not doing so hot.
Exactly. So hopefully, like we ran through 5 patterns here, where it we don't your lipid and cholesterol numbers are just a reflection of the environment that your body is operating in. And you've seen us run through basic these questions like, where is the information coming from that's causing the disruption? Supply, demand, poor clearance. Is it dietary? Like some people literally, they cannot tolerate as high levels of saturated fat, but doesn't mean that you don't eat it. We need it. It's structural. And what about the vascular terrain as well, which sort of runs alongside all of it, right? It just is. It's like the highway. So very different way that we understand fat and cholesterol. All right. Where to now, Sarah? So we kind of really pulled that one apart.
Yeah,
And
I think you did a beautiful job of compiling kind of those patterns. So props to Amanda because she puts together our pre-production notes and I do all the post-production technology
it's a
stuff. So
theme.
she
It's a
does that.
theme.
We make a good team for sure. But yeah, when I read through her notes, I was like, this is beautiful. I was like, this could be, one of a chapter if we decide to create a textbook for genomics or She could have a little ebook. So if you want to see this as an ebook, I think Amanda could sell this one. This is
Sarah and
gorgeous.
Amanda. It's just like do the background stuff. So I think in kind of wrapping it up, so we're not going to go into how we guide because I think you've seen us within the conversation how we're taking cues to environment, your story, and the genes, and all of that together is how we guide. But I think the key point is we're not chasing these numbers in isolation. We're not treating cholesterol and lipids in isolation. We're actually reading the signals, the total signaling environment that is part of every individual's biological story, your phenotype, who you are. So it's a very different way to unpack this entire topic. So
Yeah, well done. I hopefully this lands for some people because cholesterol management is a constant issue in the United States in particular. So, but we're excited for yeah, just another great topic. And I'm not sure where we're going next, Amanda. What do we
it'll be
got?
another signal. I will have picked something else out of the hat, but hopefully as we go through it's illuminating. So we're using a slightly different approach as we go into signaling, and hopefully it's illuminating for you that some things have been very reductionist, even in our training. It's like, okay, we're just put into these little silos and we're going to treat this system and unfortunately this gene or this number. But what we actually have to do in nutrition medicine is calculate a lot of kind of points at one time. And that's part of the challenge. You have to look at a lot of data, sift it through, find a system to organize the information so we can move someone, to their best self. But also if you're, as a practitioner, you can see part of this that we're talking about, but also, as a health advocate, someone if you're listening in just because it's just super interesting as you listen into our minds and how we look at things, that you may come away with a different way to look at your own information, some different questions to ask your physicians or care provider. But please don't ask them, is this a supply or demand issue? Because they're like, what are you talking about? We're going to teach them how to think this way. Supply, demand, clearance. They can see clearance, but yeah. So anyway, thought-provoking, another
Yeah.
episode.
Yep. We will see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in.